Starliner Media. Starliner Media presents Music Night at the Majestic with your host, Michael Boswell.
All right, it's time once again for Music Night at the Majestic, and with us tonight, Micky Dolenz. Micky, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Michael.
Today, it's great to have you here, Micky, because you've got the new album out, Dolenz Sings Nesmith, and I got to tell you, that's a really nice piece of work.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm quite proud of it, actually. Yeah, and Nez is too. He heard it and he said, "I like it." And more than that, I'm proud of it.
Well, his son does a fantastic job.
Oh yeah, big time.
So now for you, this is not the first time that you have done an album paying tribute to folks. You had King for a Day.
Yep.
Yeah, which the Carole King songs. And then another one of your albums that's actually a favorite of mine, Remember.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a favorite of mine too. That was a real wonderful project with a wonderful producer named David Harris. And we spent quite a lot of time on that. That was over a period of a few years. And it is one of my favorite. A lot of songs there that meant a whole lot to me over my career.
Well, I know you and Harry were really close.
Yeah.
So yeah, to do Remember, that had to be really something for you.
Yeah, it was. There was a few songs on that album that touched a chord, and the theme of the whole album was songs that meant a lot to me over my whole life. Even before the '60s, and Harry, he was a very, very good friend. I was there when he wrote that song, Remember, and loved it, and it just kind of fell into being the title song of the album. But there's quite a few wonderful cuts on that album, I think.
Yeah, well, there's actually a couple songs that you didn't record because wasn't Sugar Sugar actually pitched to the Monkees and you guys passed?
Yes. That's a long, long story of why we passed. But yeah, that was one. Yeah, that was pitched, and it was some political stuff going on. It was around the time that we were having the Palace Revolt, wanting to do our own music and stuff, and that was pitched. When I told David Harris that story, he was like, "Oh my gosh!" And of course, it became a huge hit, and it's a great song. It's really a great song. And he said, "Well, let me see what I can," because we had talked about re-envisioning these songs if we were going to do them again. Same thing with Dolenz Sings Nesmith. Wanted to kind of come up with a different, approach. And he said, "Let me see what I can do with that." And I was like, "What? It's Sugar Sugar. I mean, it's iconic. What are you going to make it a rap or something?"
Yeah.
And he, so let me see. And I was blown away by that. I just thought, I couldn't believe what he managed to get out of that tune. It's one of my favorite tracks on the album. The other one is The Diary, which also I was offered. And at the time, there's a few years before David came out with it with Bread. At the time, I was just thinking I shouldn't probably be doing a ballad right now. I should, maybe be doing something up tempo. What a stupid decision to make. Because he offered me The Diary, and the other one, I don't know if I mentioned. There's a couple of more. I was offered. I mentioned that song, good Old Fashioned Love Song. I was offered that by Paul, and I just sat on it and played around with it in my demo studio. And of course, he's not going to wait around, and he, incredible songwriter. and good old Three Dog Night just gobbled it up. And the other one was one I didn't do on Remember, but I was offered Is That All There Is? Before Peggy Lee did it. But I was only like 23 or 4. And that one I thought, come on. Is that all there is? I'm 23, what the hell? How can I sing those? It'd be like me doing, what's that Sinatra tune,
My Way.
Yeah, My Way. Doing that at 23.
Yeah. Please. There might be a bit of a believability factor to deal with there.
Yeah. So that one I don't regret. She did, that Peg Lee version is, well, obviously the definitive.
Right. Well, it's Peggy Lee.
Huh?
It's Peggy Lee.
Oh,
well, I'll tell you, you mentioned Paul having written Old Fashioned Love Song. I'd heard that he had actually tried out, for the Monkees. Is that correct?
Yes, he had. And he's never forgiven me because he also tried out for Circus Boy, a series I did in the 50s.
Uh-huh.
So he always would tease me about that. Yeah, he beat me out on 2 shows. I don't think he has anything to worry about.
I think he ended up doing okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, you mentioned Circus Boy. One of our viewers, John in South Carolina, had asked if you ever got a chance, if you got a chance to spend any time with Billy Barty on Circus Boy, and if so, what was it like working with him?
Well, I remember him, but I was 10 years old. I mean, this is like 62 years ago. No, 66 years ago. Well, how old am I?
Don't age yourself, Mickey. Don't age yourself.
I remember him because I knew who he was, who didn't. But we had a lot of really great character actors on that show, Sterling Holloway and a bunch of really wonderful character actors. And the circus performers themselves were real circus performers. Circuses, national circuses at the time were winding down quite a bit probably since the turn of the century, and especially the smaller local ones. And the producers of Circus Boy had bought this circus, from the owners of the circus, and it included a lot of the acts. And so a lot of the acts were going into acting and going into movies. So all the acts, the real circus acts, were just right off the road. And those trailers, those circus trailers were real trailers, and the animal trainers and the animals. I mean, I worked with some of the most famous animals in the business, a lot more famous than I was at the time, like Nuba the lion, the MGM lion. I got photos of me sitting on Nuba the lion's back.
Oh, wow.
Like a horse, because it was huge, friggin' lion. And I'm 10 years old, And I've got photos of me on the back of Nuba, and the chimpanzee from Tarzan, and a lot of other really wonderful, wonderful animals. Oh, it was great working with all the animals.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, that's something. That's a rare opportunity right there.
And then I end up working with Monkees.
Go figure.
Go figure. At the same studio that I did Circus Boy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. 10 years later, which now you think about it, 10 years is not a long time. When I got to the studio, when I got the Monkees and went back to the studio to start that show, the guy at the gate, the guard at the gate, recognized me and said, "Hey, Mickey, you got another show, huh? Great to see you again."
Now, that was a huge casting call for the Monkees.
Well, yes, but I'd already had a TV show. So when one has one's own TV show, one does not go to the casting call. One has one's own private audition.
The perks.
You're right. There's about 400, I heard.
Yeah. Well,
Because you had
well,
to. It wasn't just about a typical TV series, obviously, show. It was you had to be able to sing and play an instrument because it was obviously going to be something, more than just a your typical sitcom.
yeah, because I mean, you had to be able to do everything, and
Well,
not
singing,
only
you had to be able to act and sing, play an instrument, and do comedy. Improv was very important in the auditions. I remember a lot of
yeah.
improv.
Now, watching this show, which I done for a few years, quite a few years. Yeah, it always struck me that you and Mike really kind of seemed to have the same on all the improv stuff. You guys were like on the same wavelength as you were doing
You,
things.
yeah, it's funny you should mention that because we've actually talked about it over the years. Um, yeah, Mike and I hit it off in a couple of interesting ways. One, as you say, was we had similar senses of humor and still do. And we both liked Monty Python and Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, and we all we had the same sensibility in comedy. And so that's nothing you can buy. But when we started doing improv, Mike was really good at it. I wasn't. I was used to a script and the lines, and you go in, you say your lines, and you go home. You don't improv. You get thrown up, thrown off the set. So it took me a while, and I'm still not as comfortable as Nez is. But I got into it, and I kind of followed his lead on the improv. Conversely, he followed me on my lead on filming and acting and learning your lines and finding your mark and making your moves and turning to the camera and finding the light and all that. And musically, it's interesting that we also hit it off, and you can hear it in Dolenz Sings Nesmith, but also in the stuff we recorded as the Monkees. We just found this really interesting blend. I call it the Everly Monkees. And it's simply because he was from Texas, from Dallas, and obviously had grown up in the country music world, and it shows in his music. And my mom was from Austin, Texas. So I grew up in a household, and she was a singer and actress. And so I grew up in a household that, with her records being played in the 50s of Tennessee Ernie Ford and Sons of the Pioneers. And so I was used to that country flavor and that country harmony. And so Mike and I just fell right into that country harmony, third above, Everly Brothers thing. And some of the stuff I sang with him is still some of my favorite stuff. And I'm actually looking forward to doing it again when we get on the road.
Yeah. Well, tell me this, of the big songs that you guys had, from the show, which ones are your favorites to still sing to this day?
You mean of the Monkey songs of the
Yes.
big?
Yes.
Well, basically all of them. I mean, I have some pretty good songwriters, Michael. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
There's a few of them that we're hoping to have success.
There was a guy called Neil Diamond that you maybe never heard of. Carole King and Jerry Goffin, Tommy Boyce, Bobby Hart, Paul Williams, Neil Sedaka, David Gates,
Jon Stewart.
Jon Stewart, yeah. So when you have songwriters like that, they don't write many duff tunes. So, I can honestly say I can't even think of a song that I don't like singing. I mean, there's some songs over the years that you find out, and every group or singer will tell you this, some songs that you record on an album and you think they're just going to kick ass on stage, and they don't. They just, even though the audience knows them, but they just don't translate to live performance, and vice versa. You get a song in an album that you think, this will never really go, really translate into a live performance, and you try it and you get blown away. Oh my God, this really rocks. And you don't know until you try it. And like I said, So some songs, work really, really great on stage, and some, it just doesn't work. I have no idea why. It's in the universe. Somebody out there in the universe maybe knows why. So, but there are some, always loved singing a lot of carol stuff, Pleasant Valley Sunday, As We Go Along. But then again, Stepping Stone and, well, I'm a Believer, and, you can't go wrong. How can you, especially when you sing them and the audience is just so there. I mean, I equate it to somebody throwing you a birthday party every night. How can you go wrong?
Well, I'll tell you, Mickey, one of the things I had read that you had said is the fact that, and I say this because I've talked to folks who get tired of singing their big hits in concert, and a couple of them told me, it's like, I'm almost to the point where I dread doing it. I read a clip with you where you said, "Hey, they're there to hear those songs, and you enjoy doing it." And I thought that was very refreshing. That after all this time, you understand that that's why the folks are there, and you enjoy watching their enjoyment by you doing those songs.
Well, yeah, there's a few reasons for that. One is that I've been to concerts as a fan of people, I won't mention who they are, over the years, and they don't sing their hits. They either have a new album out, which is fair enough, or they want to change their image. They want to, reinvent themselves, which is also fair enough. But you can do that and still, satisfy that, that the audience that does want to maybe hear your big hits. And I've been to a few shows where I was very disappointed, and so was everybody else in the audience. But in my case personally, it has more to do with the fact that after the Monkees, I basically bailed out of the business for about 15 years or more, and got into the world of directing and producing and writing, and didn't do much singing, virtually no performing, and certainly no performing Monkee tunes. And that was like a number of years. And so I totally distanced myself, not on purpose so that I didn't like the Monkee stuff, or didn't, I just didn't need to do it. I was off into another world of production and directing and movies and television shows and all that. And so when I did get back into it, by demand in '86 for that reunion period, I came back into it wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. I hadn't sung those songs in years, and I was just going to come back and do it for a few months, frankly. And when I got out on stage singing those songs and saw the audience reaction, and I wasn't selling any new material, I wasn't trying to reinvent myself. I was quite happy to go out there and have this incredible reunion and sing these songs with all these thousands of people screaming at me, get off. And so it was a bit of that too, and always has been. I realized they want to hear those hit songs, and I have no problem singing them. I love it. And I realized and learned that once they know that they're going to get those hits, you can do virtually anything else. You can do new material, you can do album cuts, you can do other people's material, and they'll love it. They'll just love it. And so that's my philosophy to this day.
Yeah, well, that's great. I'll tell you what, while we're talking about the Monkee era, we had a question from Danny in Florida that wanted to know if you guys ever snuck the Monkeemobile out for a late night cruise.
I don't remember a late night, but I do remember taking it out during the day while we were shooting the show. And I don't think the show was actually on the air yet. So this would have been the summer of '66. Show came out in September, but we were filming since the spring, of course. And we were filming here where I grew up in the Valley in Los Angeles. And we were, and the Monkeemobile was there. We were using it in the show, of course. And we were all in costume, one of our outfits. And I think it was my idea. We said, it was lunch break, get an hour for lunch or whatever. And we said, let's just jump in the car and take it around the valley here. This is like 66. And I said, hey, let's go by this restaurant, a drive-in restaurant that I used to go to as a kid, even just, a few years earlier, called Bob's Big Boy. And this is right out of American Graffiti. Mm-hmm. This still had car hops, out in the drive-in.
Yeah.
And there's guys there with hot rods and, they're, souped up, show cars and hot rods. But nobody knew the Monkees yet. This was, before the show went on the air. And we drive in and dive into one of these slots. And people must have thought we were from another planet. It was like these four guys in makeup and these wacky shirts, all dressed up like, a band. And thinking, who the hell are these guys in this? Well, the car was designed by the incredible Dean Jeffries, who they would have known because he designed amazing show cars.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's too funny. Tell you, well, since you mentioned like getting into directing and TV work and stuff, we had another question about that era from Debbie, who wanted to know if you hold a grudge against Henry Winkler since he got the role of the Fonz on Happy Days instead of you.
I am so pissed off at no. No, are you kidding? He was the Fonz. He is the Fonz. I do remember the interview. I remember the audition because it was down to me and Henry, I believe. I didn't know Henry at the time, but he tells the story. We became great friends, and he told me when we started hanging out, he said, I remember that audition because I came in and saw you there. And he said, oh, damn, Micky Dolenz is here. I'll never get this. And I remember it well, but he was a much better Fonz than I would have been. He was and is the Fonz. Come on.
That's an iconic role.
Oh, yeah. He was perfect.
Now I'd read, I don't know if this is true or not, but you were up for the role of the Joker or the Riddler in Batman?
I've heard that rumor. I don't ever remember being asked or my agent ever calling or, whether or not somebody was in some producer's office and brought my name up. I have no idea, but I was never called or I never went for an interview or an audition. So I kind of think that might be a little bit of urban myth.
Well, I didn't know if that was the case, or I know you and Mike used to like to put stuff out during interviews just to see how far the stories would go. So I didn't know if that was one of the things that you guys had done, just messing around with folks, or if it was just an urban myth.
Well, not me. I wouldn't have done that. No.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what, obviously we want to talk about the new record, and Dolenz sings Nesmith. In the production on this, it was produced and mixed by Mike's son, Christian, is really nice. One of the things that strikes me on the record, Micky, is the song selection, because you picked a nice mix of songs that either the Monkees had done, but didn't get actually, you record them, but they didn't get put on the record at the time, or they were songs from Mike's solo stuff or with the first or second national band. How did you come to choose which tracks you did for the record?
Well, it wasn't just me, for starters. Let me make that very clear. I approached this project, as I have the last few albums that I've done, as a singer. And especially when I'm so close to the material that it's very difficult to be objective about it. And with this album, I had decided, and Christian and our A&R guy that I engaged named Andrew Sandoval, we all decided, look, we don't want to do a cover album, which are fine. Cover albums are great, and I've done them before. But we're going to try to do an album, especially with some of Mike's more iconic, maybe deep album cut stuff, that is re-envisioning some of these songs. And that was the decision. And then I basically had my few suggestions. And but I left it up to Christian and Andrew to come up with a list, and then we went over that list and then refined it. And some of those songs that were suggested, we realized that there's just no way we can, like Joanne, for instance, which is one of Mike's greatest hits. But you can't do that song without the yodel, really. I mean, and Listen to the Band, another one that we discussed. But how do you do that without a band and that, a huge band, and because it's only 2 or 3 lines. So it was kind of also down to Christian deciding which ones he felt that he could come up with something interesting. So he would noodle around on a guitar and then come up with a little demo idea and send it to me. Like Circle Sky, I couldn't believe it, because I was like, how are we going to do Circle Sky? I mean, that is so iconic, out of the movie Head, and and classic. And he said, let me give it a shot, and he did, and I was blown away. I mean, I was like, how? And then he told me the story, and he tells everybody he was fiddling around with it in his home studio, and his partner, Circe Link, who sings on backgrounds on the album, she walked by and she said, "Why don't you try it as an Indian raga?" And he did, and I mean, it's just blows me away, that tune. So that's the answer: is that Andrew and Christian, because I said up front, I know this stuff too well. I'm not going to be able to come up with, and even on that album, Remember, that you talked about, I had managed to come up with a couple of arrangements of songs like Good Morning, Good Morning. I'd come up with that was like 10 years in the making, that one. But David Harris was the one on that album that came up with those wonderful revisioning of the songs.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I like about, I should say this, the first thing I liked when I first saw the record, the album cover, because I love the nod to Nilsson Sings Newman.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a great thing. No one would say that you guys were friends, similar kind of concept on it. So I thought that was a really nice touch.
Well, that's what spawned the idea 50 years ago. I mean, I didn't think about Dolenz Sings Nesmith at that time, but I remember being there and at some of those sessions with Harry and just thinking, what a cool idea. And because I was a fan of Randy Newman also, of course. And then it was when Peter and Nez and I were rehearsing for the tour after David passed. And I just remember saying to Nez, I always thought I'd like to do this album, Dolenz Sings Nesmith. And he said, well, that's a good idea, Mickey. I'll get some songs for you. And it went on the back burner because we had a tour then, and then we went back on tour, and then we recorded an album, and then back on tour. And then I think I did a Broadway show or something. And then 7A Records got interested in doing an album, and I mentioned it to them, and that's how this all happened. And I thought about Christian, of course, but it started way back there with Nilsson Sings Newman.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, to digress for a bit, one of the questions that we got, because our viewers are very hardcore music people, and they immediately noted the connection between this album and Nilsson Sings Newman. And we had several people asking about the Hollywood Vampires. And some folks wanted to know if that actually started out as a softball team that turned into a club, or how that actually went?
You just nailed it. It was a softball team, and it was myself, Alice Cooper, Albert Brooks, and a bunch of other people that would come in and out. Peter Tork was our pitcher. He was a great pitcher. And it started out, we would play softball games on the weekend against like other record companies or at the fire department, police, and we'd raise a little money for charity. Is how it started. And Alice came up with that design for the shirts, and we had those made. If you ever seen a photograph, they're baseball shirts. And then after the game, we would go to the Rainbow here in Hollywood, the famous Rainbow, and they had this room upstairs called Over the Rainbow, and we would eat and drink and party. But it started out, as a charity, kind of a charity softball team.
That's an amazing roster. Were you guys good? Did you win a lot?
No, usually we lost. No,
but you had fun.
No, when you're playing the fire department and the police department, you're probably a bunch of old rock and rollers. No, we probably lost a lot. I don't remember actually, but it was all for fun.
Yeah. Well, you had people would kind of come and go in the club too, didn't you?
When John Lennon was in town, he would hang out, and Keith Moon and Ringo, and so it became like like the Round Table. What was that in New York? Dorothy Parker and the Algonquin. It became a little bit of that too.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, mentioning Lennon, one of our viewers, Bliss, said that wrote and said, in June of '67, headlines read, "Monkees meet the Beatles and take England by storm." So he wanted to know, what was that like?
Well, I'm told I had a great time. I frankly, Michael, I don't remember a whole lot. So much was going on. You get caught in this. It's like you're in the eye of the hurricane, and all this stuff's going on around you, and you see it in performers and people today, and it's even worse today because of social media, and you can see it in people's eyes. These kids and performers where they're just blank stares, and it's really tough to remember because there's just so much input, and at a certain point your brain kind of shuts off, and you just But I remember little bits and pieces. I do remember meeting Paul. He was the first Beatle that I met. And it was set up by the publicist for a Monkee meets Beatle photo.
Right.
And he was very gracious. And I remember that because it was just the two of us. There wasn't any big scene. It was at his house. And so I do remember that. And he reminds me of, to this day, he remembers that too when we first met. And he's always been incredibly great. I was a huge fan. And, let's face it, the Monkees ultimately and he got it. The Beatles got what the Monkees was about. The Monkees was a television show about a band. It wasn't a band. It was a television show about a band that wanted to be the Beatles. It wasn't America's answer to the Beatles. It was a television show about this band who wanted to be the Beatles and wanted to be famous and successful. And on the television show, we never were. We were always struggling for that success, which is, I think, one of the reasons that it did so well, and it was loved by so many and endeared because it spoke to all those kids out there at the time who were in their basements and garages and little recording studios trying to be famous and working at it and struggling for that success. But on the show, we never were successful.
Yeah. Well, tell me this, was it during that trip that you got the idea for Randy?
It was during the first tour of England. It was during when we were actually on tour there. That it wasn't an idea Randy Scousket is a stream of consciousness sort of, song like On the Road by Jack Kerouac or something like that. I was literally, and funnily, I do remember sitting in the hotel room at the Grosvenor, and it was after a party, and my friend was there, Rick. He's the birthday boy, and there was a what do you call it? A guy comes in with the breakfast and coffee, and he was wearing, a tuxedo. And so that's all. I'm just writing kind of what I'm experiencing. Birds out on the sidewalk, or girls out on the sidewalk screaming up, and the references to a girl is who would become my first wife, Samantha, and Wonder Woman, and so it was just stream of consciousness stuff about what was happening, literally, like almost word for word, just writing a bit like a diary, kind of a poem about what was happening.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, getting back to the album. Now, the album opens with Carlisle Wheeling, which you guys actually had recorded for the Birds, the Bees, and the Monkees album, but it didn't get included. And then Mike recorded a version of it under the title Conversations, correct?
Yeah.
Now, what about that song made you want to include that one?
Well, I've always loved it. I mean, I heard Mike sing it when he wrote it, and so I've always loved it. But again, I left a lot of that up to Christian and Andrew, and especially, Christian, who thought he'd be able to, again, I use that word, overusing it probably, a re-envision. And there were a lot of songs that he tried, and worked at, I'm sure. And, just thought, I just can't get something on this one, or not. And, but I've always loved, but I heard all these songs, as Nesmith was writing them. Different Drum is one where we all agreed we really should do this. First of all, it was written by a guy, for a guy to sing. And even though Linda was the first to do it, I don't know. I'm sure that there have been recordings by guys before, but certainly not as successful as Linda's. But listen, Michael, it's been really, really interesting.
Yeah, well, tell you what, I actually lost track of time as we're going through all your stories here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for your time.
No problem at all.
All your watcher, listener, podcast people.
All right. Sounds good. Well, tell you what, we'll wrap this one up. Mickey, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good night.
Have a good night.
This has been Music Night at the Majestic with Michael Boswell. If you enjoyed this edition of Music Night at the Majestic, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and at musicnight.net. Music Night at the Majestic is a copyright production of Starliner Media. Any use of the accounts and descriptions of this program, its audio or visual content, without the express written consent of Starliner Media is prohibited. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time for Music Night at the Majestic. This is your announcer speaking. Starliner Media.